reflection is from the 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. Last week, we heard of how Jesus corrected Peter's attempt to prevent the passion. Not trying to gain any favor from Peter, Jesus stood his ground and confronted Peter. He was honest with Peter, even if this meant momentary displeasure for both of them. In the professional world, any conflict that occurs between co-workers is expected to be dealt with at the most immediate level. Rather than running to the higher ups, whenever a problem arises, workers are expected to try and resolve the problem person to person first. This is the normal process of conflict resolution for adults. Believe it or not, this is the most merciful approach for the wrongdoer. If I warn him before getting management involved, then allow him to change his ways without any scrutiny from above. However, certain acts are considered so gravely wrong by society standards, such as elder abuse or child abuse, that if an abuser is caught in the act, he must be reprimanded immediately and he must be separated from the victim. This is an obligation of the person who caught the abuser in the act. But this is highly unusual, usually for the worst cases. Now, what does all of this have to do with this Sunday's gospel reading? Well, in today's gospel reading, Jesus challenges a victim of sin to correct the person who sinned against him. Notice that this is different from our normal way of thinking. We usually think that the wrongdoer has the obligation of asking for forgiveness. On the contrary, Jesus asked the victim to be proactive in seeking reconciliation. Jesus lays out a three-step process by which a victim may confront the one who sinned against him. It starts out at the most basic level, the local level. Fraternal correction from brother to brother or sister to sister is the least vindictive approach. Notice how this approach allows a sinner's wrongdoings to remain private, as I said earlier, without public scrutiny or scrutiny of management. He has a chance to repent and to amend his ways in private without being under the scrutiny of the public eye. Correcting someone in public can be a humiliating experience. I know I've experienced that once or twice, This private fraternal approach, if the sinner listens, keeps peace in the workplace. In fact, the one-to-one approach allows a brother to correct another brother without getting the superiors involved. And remember, the word frater, the root word for fraternal, comes from the Latin word for brother. This promotes a workplace of brotherhood and trust that the one correcting the wrongdoer is doing so out of mercy. In our second reading, St. Paul tells the Romans that the only debt we owe each other is love. This ties in nicely with the gospel reading because to admonish a sinner is a spiritual work of mercy. The first reading recalls how during the Babylonian exile, due to Israel's sins, God set the prophet Ezekiel as a watchman over Israel. This special prophetic role of Ezekiel gives him the responsibility of warning the Israelites to listen to and to obey God's words. From the first reading, God says, "If I tell the wicked, O wicked one, you shall surely die, and you do not speak out to dissuade the wicked from his way, the wicked shall die for his guilt, but I will hold you responsible for his death." Like teachers, parents, prophets, and those in the positions that instruct others in the truth, we are called to persuade sinners, at least to attempt to do so, to call them to change their ways. Remember, we can never force anyone to act righteous. We can attempt to persuade a sinner by sharing the truth of his actions and the consequences that will follow upon these actions. Something I read years ago by John Paul II in the context of the communist regimes. This is not a direct quote, but it goes something like this. He emphasizes the force of truth being greater than the truth of force. Again, I repeat, this is something I read that stuck with me as very beautiful, I thought. He wrote how, in the context of the communist regimes, that the force of truth is more persuasive than the truth of force. In some cases, it would be prudent not to give fraternal correction because a person may not receive the correction well. Our attempts may be futile. Yet, when the occasion arises to correct the sinner, we should do so assertively but gently. This will hopefully dispose the wrongdoer to being more open to listening. If this does not work, then the gospel mentions to get 2 or 3 witnesses involved. And then if this does not work, then it says to bring in the church. If the sinner still does not repent, then the gospel says to treat him as a Gentile or tax collector. I think that setting boundaries with an obstinate sinner is healthy. For instance, you would not want to support an abusive habit by naively putting yourself in harm's way. Setting healthy boundaries does not mean cutting off all forms of communication with this wrongdoer. Coincidentally, within these passages, the gospel speaks of prayer. This is fitting since praying for an obstinate sinner may be the best thing to do. God's grace may soften his or her heart. Even if one's prayer does not change the other person, it can do much to change oneself. Perhaps God may give us the grace to be more patient or to endure the sinner's wrongdoings against us or injustices against us. The gospel does not explicitly mention this, but I think we need to try to understand the sinner's circumstances. As the second reading pointed out, all humans are owed love, and though a sinner may be stuck in sin, he should not, and he is not defined by his sin. A sinner is a human being who deserves to be told the truth. He deserves love. Jesus displays this pastoral approach when he instructs the sinner that sinners should be given many chances to repent. Through this pastoral approach, we can ask a person who is stuck in sin questions such as, what were the circumstances that led you to these acts? Or why do you do this act? And be sincere. Establish a relationship with the person so that they open up to you. A good judge tries to explore all facts of a case before making his final judgment. Being mindful of or understanding the sinner's situation can help one to find the root cause of the problem and so help to prevent future problems. The Church is the final authority and protector of the Catholic faith. As such, she needs to make clear judgments regarding the faith so that others are not led into error. She usually goes through a lengthy investigative process. I want to challenge all of you, including myself. Do we do our own due diligence before jumping to conclusions about a sinner? Do we ask questions? Do we treat the other person as a human being, although he is committing sin? Can we follow these gospel teachings and be more pastoral in our correction of others who have wronged us? May God bless you.